Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Hello, and welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with me, your supposedly intrepid host, Peter Robbins. We have a very special show tonight, the first hour of which will have two guests, and I want to get right to it. My guests today are Ralph and Deborah Blumenthal. Ralph Blumenthal is a distinguished lecturer at the Baruch College of the City University of New York, my dad's alma mater, and summer journalism instructor at Phillips Exeter Academy in Exeter, New Hampshire. He was awarded He was an award-winning reporter for the New York Times from 1964 to 2009 and has written 7 books on organized crime and cultural history. He led the Times Metro team that won the Pulitzer Prize for breaking news coverage on the 1993 truck bombing of the World Trade Center. In 2001, Blumenthal was named a Fellow of the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation to research the progressive career and penal reforms of Warren Lewis E. Laws, the man who made Sing Sing sing. The book on Warren Laws' Miracle at Sing Sing was published by St. Martin's Press in June of 2004. During the coronavirus pandemic, Ralph contributed articles to the Times and other publications, working from home on his Baruch Archives blog, An Adventure in Democracy, and giving virtual talks on his new book, The Believer, Alien Encounters, Hard Science, and the Passion of John Mack. For more than 45 years, Blumenthal led an extensive and illustrious career at the Times as Texas correspondent and Southwest bureau chief from 2003 to 2008, arts and cultural news reporter from 1994 to 2003, investigative and crime reporter from 1971 to 1994, correspondent in West Germany, South Vietnam, Cambodia from 1968 to 1971, and Metro and Westchester correspondent from 1964 to 1968. He began his journalism career as a reporter columnist for the Grand Prairie Daily News Texan in 1963. Blumenthal earned a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2001, a Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism Alumni Award in 2001, and the Nieman Foundation's Worth Bingham Prize for Distinguished Investigative Reporting on U.S. air crashes in 1994. He was named a Townsend Harris Medalist of the City College Alumni Association in 2012 and inducted into the CCNY Communications Alumni Hall of Fame in 2010. Since that year, he has taught journalism in the high school summer program of Phillips Exeter Academy in Exeter, New Hampshire, and in 2010 was named a distinguished lecturer at Baruch College, where he taught journalism and currently oversees historic collections in the Newman Library Archives. You can find his website at ralphblumenthal.com. Deborah Blumenthal is an award-winning journalist, a nutritionist, who now divides her time between writing children's books and adult novels. She has also been a regular contributor to the New York Times, including 4 years as the Sunday New York Times Magazine beauty columnist and a home design columnist for Long Island Newsday. Her health, fitness, and beauty and travel and feature stories have appeared widely in many other newspapers and national magazines, including New York's Daily News, The Washington Post, The Los Angeles Times, Bazaar, Cosmopolitan, Women's Day, Family Circle, Self, and Vogue. Deborah Blumenthal and Ralph Blumenthal live in New York City, and you can visit Deborah's website at deborahblumenthal.com. That said, Ralph and Deborah Blumenthal, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Thank you, Peter.
It's a privilege and great fun, really, to have you here. It was wonderful meeting you both in Exeter over the Labor Day weekend at the wonderful Exeter UFO Festival and conference that we have every year there. And Ralph, I think you and I began corresponding on and off about 10 years ago, but only met last year. It's understood by a lot of our listeners and viewers that you were instrumental, along with our friend Leslie Kane and the great Helene Cooper, in breaking the UFO story in a manner that it had never been done in December of 2017 in the New York Times. I reflect back on that time myself, and I remember reading those articles and thinking, well, this is great, but how long is this going to last? The other shoe's going to drop and we're going to go back to the ridicule. It literally took me almost a year to realize that something profound had changed, whether or not it was the series of articles or whether that kind of marked a turning point that might have been happening otherwise. I don't know, but it made a difference. And you've just made history, as far as I'm concerned, in the publishing world with the publication of the first bluntly accurate UFO book aimed at young readers and children book readers. I'm embarrassed to say I'm forgetting the name of your wonderful illustrator, but he added immensely to your ability to tell the story. Can I ask you to start with, how did this book come about from both of your separate careers and interests?
Okay. First, I'll fill in the name of the illustrator. It's Adam Gustafson, who has done numerous children's books. And I knew Adam because he had illustrated a book of mine called The Blue House Dog. And I was absolutely thrilled with the work he did on that book, and he just got it. So I thought he would be perfect for this book, and he got it with this one as well. I'm just going to hold up the book here so people can see the cover. It's UFOHS, Mysteries in the Sky. And I'll tell you a little bit about how the book began. As you know, Peter, Ralph was doing a lot of publicity for The Believer.
Yes.
And especially during the pandemic, we were home together, and I heard one interview after another. And it struck me one day, as a children's book writer, always in search of ideas for new stories, is there a book on UFOs for picture book readers? And I did a little research and found out that no, in fact, there really wasn't anything out there for the youngest readers. There were some books for middle and young adult age readers, but there was nothing for picture book readers. And what better subject to lend itself to a picture book? So I mentioned the idea to Ralph, and he didn't seem to focus on it for a while. And I judged him, as I often do.
Delicately phrased.
So eventually we agreed that, we'd see if it would come together. And so we did. I don't recall if I did the first draft or, we sent it back and forth to each other, to computers. And eventually, we agreed on a story that we were both happy with. So that was really how it all began.
Yeah, it is interesting collaborating with a spouse, because you share so much of your lives, and yet you don't usually sit down and do a book together. But Debbie saw me working on The Believer so hard, and I saw her working on her children's books. So it was kind of a natural progression to try to put our two sides together. And we were very happy with the way it worked out.
Well, with good cause. And as you know, Ralph, I was very moved by The Believer. I remember speaking with you early on that after beginning the research, you just missed meeting John, who was tragically killed by a drunken driver in England in 2004. And for me, John, who was a towering presence in the world of UFO studies, the world of psychological studies, I was introduced to him years ago when I worked as a volunteer crisis intervention counselor on the busiest suicide hotline in America, New York City. And they had a small library there, all psychology books. And at night, sometimes, you'd pick one up and read it. And I didn't realize a book of his that most people don't associate with him on adolescent suicide was in the library. And that name, John Mack, stuck in my mind. And when he met Bud Hopkins, and then John and I became friends, it was one of the richest relationships that I had had. He had the common touch, and at the same time was absolutely brilliant. And you captured it all in that wonderful biography. I think it will remain the definitive biography. Before we go on, I wanted to ask you both how or when you first, either as children or adolescents or as time went on, when you first encountered the subject of UFOs in a manner that you thought, maybe there is something to this. Ralph, what was that? When was that for you?
I read a lot of science fiction as a kid. It was very popular when I grew up. Of course, it was all fiction. I mean, Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, the giants of science fiction, and it was fanciful. They imagined life on other planets, reaching other worlds, and then they combined it into psychological thriller stories. It wasn't just aliens, but what happened to the astronauts themselves. Anyway, it was complex, but it was really rich. But then I stopped when I went on to college, studied art, studied journalism, became a New York Times reporter. So I kind of lost my interest in science fiction. And it all came back when I ran across John Mack. I don't know, Debbie, did you read any?
You know what? I never read science fiction. I was always interested in medicine and health and science, but never science fiction. So my interest began when Ralph wrote the book, and in terms of UFOs, and that piqued my curiosity at that point. But no, I really never ventured into that area at all.
Peter, you mentioned your contacts with John and Bud. I'm in awe of people who actually knew them. I met Bud at the end of his life. I was fortunate enough to interview him shortly before he died, sadly, of cancer. But John, as you said, I missed. And to run across people like you who had interactions with them and could tell me stories about what it was like to know them, it's really very, very impressive and very powerful.
Well, I knew John considerably less and less long than I did Bud. Bud and I were friends and colleagues for 35 years, during a good part of which I worked as his assistant. And John, on his second visit, told me about the first visit. John Mack, a psychiatrist, learns that there is a painter in New York who is convinced that aliens are abducting people in their craft. John's point of view at that moment was, I'd be very interested in meeting somebody with this mental aberration, because obviously there is a problem here.
Right.
And he, at Bud's invitation, came to his studio, and Bud essentially said, I'm going to open my entire archive to you, which includes a great deal of confidential information, everything from X-rays to CAT scans to multiply corroborated testimony, physicians, mental health professionals, everything imaginable. And John said, I left there, turned around 180 degrees. And when he came back again, he told me this story with a great deal of laughter and affection. He had an absolutely wonderful sense of humor, and they were both great men who also happened to be great guys. And after he read my first book on the British UFO case, Rendlesham Forest, he was impressed enough to say he wanted to see if he could get me a speaking gig at Harvard. I didn't laugh in his face, but I said, let me know how it works out. Harvard passed on me. And he said, well, that doesn't mean I can't bring you to Boston, and you can speak under the auspices of the Cambridge Hospital, the psychiatric wing of which I founded. And so my talk there was twofold. It was on the case, and then for the second half, he joined me as a co-respondent, as he put it, to talk about managing stress in UFO studies, your witnesses or your abductees, as well as your own. And I felt, well, very fortunate to know him. And again, you captured so much about him, plus the haunting reality that accompanied him his whole life, that loss of his mother. It was sometimes, great lives parallel or almost mimic great literature, and talk about a sweeping narrative. As somebody that's done this work for many years, there has been a need, as far as I'm concerned, for a book just like yours. There have been, not surprisingly, many children's books and young adults books over the years regarding the UFO phenomena. And I had a number of them in my library that I pulled out in advance of our getting together here. And I just wanted to give you two a little idea of some of what came before you. This book was published, I think, in 1955. And they brought out a, as you can see at the bottom, new revised edition. And in the new revised edition, they had like 3 or 4 pages that address the UFO question fairly seriously, beginning with Ezekiel, and then talking about a few cases, and then moving on. But that in itself back then was pretty remarkable. We go to 1970 to a much more prevalent kind of book where it's fiction, but they tease you with, gee, these kids might have seen a spaceship, and then it's explained at the end in conventional terms and, rest easy, children of America. I think the lighthearted nature of the cover gives you an idea of what this book was about from 1973. And once again, it's very playful. It could be this, it could be that, but the odds are very strictly against, our fantasies coming true. Here's a page from this book, and it reads from the previous page, this can happen. Many people have seen things that didn't really exist. Perhaps you have too. Our eyes are not always reliable. We see things that aren't really there. And we also miss seeing other things. Let's see how this works. And it goes on to talk about the optics of your eyes.
Terrible.
Another one that kind of tells the tale on the cover. They touch on, it's possibly this, it could be that, and where they regard the possibility of visitors from space, well, they don't seem very friendly. This is from 1987. A Random House book, like Time Life, which published a remarkably good series of books on UFO and the paranormal about 1987. This one surprised me a bit. It did ultimately conclude around the Project Blue Book idea of there are some unknowns, but they can probably be all explained. But they did have a wonderfully lurid illustrator who did touch on some real cases. And there's a wonderful illustration here of poor Lonnie Zamora, police officer who encountered the egg-shaped UFO. And another one that talked, and again, this is back in the 80s, about conspiracies and government cover-ups and fear of mass panic, citing the War of the Worlds, which you brought to my attention, was overly hyped. I had read many years ago Professor Hadley Cantrell's The Mass Psychology from Princeton University Press, which impressed me until I compared the statistics that you had given me that were more accurate from later on. Anyway, we have another book here, which is a little more open to the possibility, but a great deal caught up in wish fulfillment and the what ifs, and children's imaginations combined with the possibility of reality. Here's one from 1991, which, again, what would you do if you met an alien? And it's sort of playful, but intertwines some possibility that they might be real. And one more here. Cute, but not very realistic. And it does look a rather happy alien, and once again proving that they are green. I don't know where that came from, but that's been part of the mythology to start with. When you two started to wrestle with the idea of a book on this subject, I mean, there were so many ways you could go on it. What was the first thought that let you set up kind of a spine for the narrative and telling the story in the way that you were going to tell it?
Well, the first thing is that, again, the books you've shown us all are positioned for the middle grade to older reader, first of all, aside from the validity of, what's in them and however way they're written. But we were positioning this book for 6-year-old, 6 to 9-year-old. And we were very, very careful about being factual and not discussing, any things that we couldn't really nail down in terms of photographs, accounts that have been, verified over and over and over by people around the world. And so we raised more questions than we gave answers to. And we just essentially wanted to open the topic to parents and teachers and children to begin a discussion, just laying out the very basics, what we know, and laying out the questions. What could these things be? Where do they come from? What do you think of them? Have you ever seen them? This is so we provided information. This is what they look like. We started the book, and I'll just show you the opening page with a story of two boys on a tennis court. And in fact, that actually happened. Playing tennis, when they looked up, they saw a UFO. And Ralph talks about the Wes who we mentioned in the book in The Believer, who is now a psychiatrist. We also referenced the incident in Zimbabwe where children were in a playground.
Brilliant.
Their accounts of what they saw, their pictures and their accounts were all the same. And these children had never had any experience with UFOs before. So, we felt this was very concrete, reliable material. And those were the kind of things we included in the book. We didn't venture beyond what really we could confirm.
In that way, this book tracked our New York Times reporting, because we also were very factual in the New York Times article. We did not speculate about aliens. We don't know who or what is sending these these objects here. What we do know now, and this is the big breakthrough, is that they really exist. I mean, these things are physically real. They're aerodynamically amazing, capable of things that no, worldly craft can do, sometimes operating underwater. So we had the same principles with this book, that we're going to stick to what has been verified. We're not going to speculate. It's going to be strictly factual, and we don't provide answers as much as the questions, and providing a framework for young people to question their parents when they see things on TV, because they're going to be exposed to this all the time, more and more as they grow up. So we wanted to give them kind of an unbiased, factual framework to consider this, as the book subtitle says, Mysteries in the Sky.
Yes. It's such a simple premise and idea to present factual material to children with the understanding that the adult world does not know all the answers, and in many cases, none of the answers to certain things. To digress for a moment, I remember when I was about 7 or 8, and in Sunday school, one afternoon, the rabbi stuck his head in the room and says, "Children, I have a few minutes. Does anybody have any questions for me?" And he made the mistake of calling on me. I had just come from a very long discussion with a young friend who went to the parochial school in the village I came of age in, who had filled my head with many things that confounded me: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the literal heaven and hell, communion, confession. And I blurted all this out and said, "What do we believe, Rabbi?" And Rabbi Lieberman, a Russian emigre and a wonderful religious leader, I'm hearing his Russian accent in my head. "What a wonderful question. Children, as you go forward in life, remember the question that Peter has asked. It's important to ask questions about everything around you. We need to know these things for ourselves." And I'm thinking to myself, he doesn't know the answer. Is that good? Is that bad? Years later, when I thought back that in Reform Judaism, essentially the dogma was God is love, figure the rest out for yourself.
Right. Well, in that spirit, we wrote this book.
Exactly. But that as two gifted, award-winning, respected professional writers, that you are able to keep out of your own way. And, I'm a knowledgeable adult, kids. Let me tell you what's going on here. I often find myself, as perhaps you do, in doing an interview, and somebody will ask me a hyper-specific question about the Pleiadians or what's going on in Alpha Centauri or power sources of UFOs. And I will simply answer, "I don't know." And the response sometimes is, "Well, what do you mean? You're an expert." I said, "Well, let's talk about that very uncomfortable word."
I'm glad you raised that, because it opens up the question of the so-called skeptics, who are very quick with answers to everything. And John Mack thought he had answers when he discovered this subject through Bud Hopkins.
Yes.
And he quickly found he didn't have the answers. And not only that, but the skeptics who were deluging him with answers and saying it's very simple. This is sleep apnea, or these people are making it up to make money, or they're confused, or they're reciting a book that they read. Well, 12-year-old kids, 10-year-old kids are not talking about books that they've read on UFOs. Anyway, one by one, John Mack eliminated all the possibilities, and he was left with questions. So my quarrel with the skeptics, I often reflect on this, is that they're too quick with answers. They think they've solved this thing, and the more you know about it, if you spend the time looking into it, as I have and we have now, you realize that we don't know the answers, and there is no answer yet apparent. Maybe we'll find one, but all there are questions. But the government has made a great stride recently, and that is that these objects now no longer are mythical. The objects are physical and they're real, and they can do astounding things. That's as much as we know, but that's something. And then that's more than we knew, years ago.
For me, again, the idea of anybody being referred to as an expert is kind of an existential joke, because you're saying you're an expert in the unknown, which is problematic. Also, not to make too fine a point of it, but all of us, especially those of us with fairly high visibility in the work, need to remain in good, healthy contact with our skeptical selves. For me, as one of those people who worked so closely for so long on a one-to-one basis with people who genuinely feel, allege, believe, or know that they have been taken and returned. Number one, who are any of us to say what another person's experience is? But seeing the preponderance of evidence over the decades, including hard evidence, a CAT scan of something that shouldn't be in somebody's brain, or an implant way up in somebody's nasal cavity, knowing that there are 3 generations in the family that share the same memories or have the same scoop mark here and there, I no longer have what I call the luxury of disbelief. And I have to be very careful because a certain part of me is quite assured that some of the more exotic aspects of the UFO subject are true, to never jump the gun. It's the debunkers who are the ones who have the colossal intellectual arrogance to say, essentially the mantra is, it can't be, therefore it's something else, therefore you're wrong, and I'll pat you on the head and give you some explanation to deal with my anxiety behind my arrogance, because if this is true, I've got a big problem with everything that I thought was actual. And so over the years, with people who used to irritate the hell out of me and have that attitude, I often try to look beyond it and understand that it's very likely that they are having real problems with this, and attack the messenger if you have a problem with the message.
Peter, you mentioned something early on about how this book is likely to be received in different parts of the country. You want to talk about that?
Well, we found in general, as I think everyone in this field knows, that there are some people that when you tell them, oh, I wrote a book about UFOs, well, first of all, half of them will walk away, and the rest will say, really? Or I recently told someone who was trimming my hair, she said, oh, what are you working on? I said, well, my husband and I just wrote a book on UFOs. She says, oh, do you believe in them? And I was kind of taken aback. Well, do you believe in the ocean? I mean, it's there. Maybe you've never been to the coast and seen it, but it is there. So it's you get very strange reactions, I think, but there is a tremendous division between people who want to know more and people who just completely are not interested in hearing about it, and they think it's completely wacko.
Well, they think it's demonic. Yeah. There are people, especially some fundamentalists, and
you're absolutely right.
People in the UFO offices in the Pentagon who actually worked on trying to understand these videos, these scientific measurements that they had gotten about these objects. They rejected hearing about it. Don't even tell me about this because it's demonic. I don't want to know about it. So you're dealing with that kind of a mindset too. And actually, if you really want to think about it, if you believe that, there's a God and God is all powerful, why couldn't he or she create UFOs? So it's really not something that has to be adverse to believing in a guiding spirit, a deity, God. It's part of creation. It's just something that we don't understand. Just like we don't understand God, we don't understand love. I mean, what is love? You can't see it. You can't measure it. There's a lot of things we don't understand. Death. What happens when we die? What are all these afterlife experiences? There's a lot of things we don't understand, but we should at least pay it the respect by trying to at least list the properties of the thing that we don't understand, and think that someday maybe we will understand it.
I think Ralph also brings up a good point, which is that some people think this isn't a subject that's appropriate for children. They somehow think we have to protect children from this information. And, again, it's like talking to children about death. Maybe it's not pleasant on some level, or it's scary, but the younger children are, and the sooner they're introduced to certain topics, the more comfortable they are with those topics, and they're not frightening. So, the more you can educate them, and the sooner, I think that's what we need to do in every field, and especially in the science field.
Children know a lot more than we give them credit for. They're young, vacuum cleaners. They're picking up all these social and cultural references and wondering about them. And if we ignore them, we're just feeding into, ignorance. But if we address them and explain, well, we don't know the answer, but this is, what we do know about it, they're going to be picking this up for a long time from, TV, from books, from their peers, the people talking about this. They go to movies. So this is in the ether. So we hope we can, by identifying it and addressing it, we can add to at least the comfortability factor here, that parents and children are comfortable discussing it and asking about it.
Several thoughts came up for me while you were both speaking. When I was 14 years old, I, along with my sister Helen, had a profoundly unambiguous UFO sighting. About 30 miles east of you in Nassau County, the village of Rockville Center, where I came of age, playing out in front of the house, a very innocent pair of kids at a very relatively innocent time in America, and a clear blue sky, 5 silvery white disc-shaped objects came into our vision at a high rate of speed and stopped over the neighbor's house. I had, at 14, I was about as sophisticated as Leave It to Beaver. And at the same time, I had intuited the adult world's understanding that flying saucers and the like are fine in the movies that you see on Saturday at the Fantasy Theater with all of the wonderful space monsters and explosions, but they're really not real. And there they were. It was the most profoundly shocking moment of my life, and so much so that it overwhelmed me, and the memory became repressed for many years. When it came back, we discussed it, and it was a major turning point in both of our lives. I bring it up because at a certain point, I went into the house to tell our mother what we had seen. And my mom, who was a great woman, rose to be the highest ranking female in the entire Nikon organization back in the 70s and 80s, and interfaced with every professional and famous photographer in America. It was a dream job for her, and she was the right person for it. But as a housewife, back when we were kids, I went into the house. It was June, late morning, early afternoon. She was at the stove, I think, making grilled cheese sandwiches for us for lunch. I have relived this in 2 hypnotic regressions, one with Bud and one with an earlier mentor, a tough, no-nonsense New York City police detective who received special training in hypnotic regression for criminal investigation by the NYPD. And I stood in the doorway and I, word for word, said, "Mom, Helen and I saw some things in the sky that looked like flying saucers from the movies." Now, my mother could have said anything. And she turned to me and she just looked at me seriously. And I remember thinking, this is the way grown-ups look at each other. And many years later, when my sister and I talked to her and my dad about this, she didn't remember it. But after having spent so much time with so many people who were referring back to their memories in childhood, I tried to tell my mother or my dad, and they said, "Oh, honey, you just thought it looked like that," or, it was an imaginary thing, or it could have been a strange shaped cloud, insulting the child's intelligence. Or the adult saying, "I didn't know what to say to my child. I was so concerned that if I validated it, they might." I think what my mother did was intuitively brilliant. It allowed me to feel respected for what we had encountered, in fact, and not to complexify in any bad way that part of the relationship with my parent. I think this book is going to be, among other things, a wonderful point of discussion, not just for children to parents or parents to children, but children to other children, parents to other parents, and ultimately the reading community in general, and libraries. As you mentioned before, fundamentalism in religion, and it doesn't matter, we usually think of it in our culture, Islamic fundamental, Christian fundamentalism, there's Jewish, Buddhist, and Hindu and other fundamentalist attitudes, and it's a rigidity of nothing is open to interpretation, everything is as it was, God wrote it all with a giant fountain pen. And I've gotten into a number of respectful but very animated discussions and arguments over the years with fundamentalist Christian UFO researchers. They're out there. And it's impossible to make your point, whatever it is.
It's funny you say that, because in my book, The Believer, I talk about John Mack's contacts with the Vatican.
Oh, yeah.
They were very open to discussions of UFOs and paranormal things, because after all, the religion is based on contacts between superhuman entities and humanity. So the Vatican has actually been more open to understanding or studying this phenomenon than a lot of other authorities. So that is interesting. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And that began to change about 30 years ago, from the most dogmatic, best organized of the organized world religions to the most open, the most encouraging. And for quite a number of years, I think he passed about 10 years ago, but the Vatican's representative, a Cardinal Balducci, became their spokesperson on the reality, and in fairly short time became a major presence in the Italian media, and then started to speak at UFO conferences, including in this country. Other religions would do well to follow in that direction. It also occurs to me, as kind of an experiment, you too might want to think about libraries that maybe your local branch, the main branch, New York City, the Exeter Academy Library, private school library, and make some gifts and perhaps get some very interesting feedback from that. Also, an immediate readership, because, gee, they've got this new book in the library and everybody wants to read it, and there's a list, we better buy some more.
We spoke to yesterday, the Zoom we did with in Mesa, Arizona.
Oh, yes, we did a wonderful discussion with a woman from the Mesa, Arizona library. And, we made the point that we love libraries. We love librarians. They're great resource people. And, I think they're not appreciated for the gifts they can potentially offer. And so, yes, I think that's a terrific idea. We love to do more work with libraries. And every time we hear that the budgets are being cut, we cringe.
Terrible.
So.
We both grew up, going to the library, getting books out.
Every week, I remember.
Yeah, like the books you showed on the screen. I mean, a librarian can expose, children to a range of information. Say, well, look at this book. And what do you think of this? Look at this book. Compare them. How are they different? Why are they different?
Right.
You're absolutely right.
I would bet you money that within the community of librarians who happen to be among, whether it's a small town or a big city library, among, well, the best read, certainly, but the most open-minded, the most knowledgeable, the most feet on the ground thinkers with the widest range of subjects to draw from. I'm going to guess that there will be quite a number of fans within the community of librarians. And perhaps the book will be popular enough here that you will want to bring it out in some quality translations in other languages. I know that I've already spoken to a number of people in the work, but also in the podcast and broadcasting community across the United Kingdom, who are waiting for this book and also would like a chance to interview you. And we can talk about that later. I'm happy to facilitate that.
That'd be great.
But this is,
as you know, Peter, it's a worldwide phenomenon.
Right.
And, people say, well, why is this only happening in America?
Right.
It's not only happening in America. And people say, well, why is this not happening in New York? It is happening in New York.
I'll say.
I wrote a story a while ago in the New York Times about two authors who wrote a book about, they just cataloged the sightings everywhere. They didn't anecdotally describe the sightings. They just made a record of every place where UFOs have been seen, what time of day, what shape, all the data. And there were quite a number in New York City, to my surprise. You just don't hear about them, but they're everywhere.
Yeah. I'll tell you another group of readers that this book will be particularly important to, and a special reading experience for them. It seems for some people that, are intellectually curious about this, but very much outside the work, that if a child steps forward and alleges that it has had a contact experience or been taken, and if so, the overwhelming chances are that their parent and their parent were, however extreme it may sound, that for some children who have some experience here, to read a book that doesn't tell them the answers, but treats them in a respectful adult way. We don't remember that feeling necessarily, but that validation of, you may be right, you may be more right than I am. And we're both free to ask questions around this and to come to our own best conclusions. It's an empowerment, it's a gift. And for those children in particular, and I think of some that Bud worked with and that John worked with, and some I was, the bug on the wall. Bud had developed something called the Hopkins Image Recognition Test.
Right.
And of course, these wonderful cartoon drawings done by my colleague, Sal Amendola, who was a wonderful professional cartoonist for many years, as like flashcards. And the difference between the skeleton and the Halloween imagery and a simple rendition of a gray was always identified as such. For a child like that, somebody might say, well, your parents are influencing you, because once again, I can't deal with this, so I've got to attack somebody. And again, for a child who's had an experience or a sighting, or just takes it seriously, as opposed to enjoying all of the great UFO-related entertainment we've been hit with forever, that will be a book to have with pride in your library. And I know quite a number of kids, I'm sure you do too, who they're proud library builders. Their book collection means a lot to them and extends into adulthood, like, people like us who revere books as well as reading.
I think you raise a very important point, Peter. And I think children may definitely feel stigmatized if they have been subjected to these experiences and can't talk about them, or perhaps do talk about them and they're ridiculed,
That's right.
which is, so painful to think of. So I would hope that this brings some normalcy, if you will, to the subject, to say this is happening all over the world. You're not alone. And let's have children who've had this experience, who are interested in the experience, just share what information they can with each other, to bring it down to a comfort level.
And you mentioned the Hopkins recognition test. There was a very funny story I came across in my research for the John Mack book. There were, as you mentioned, they were like cards with different images. There was a face of a clown and a lion and this and that. And among them was an alien. And the questioner, I think it might have been John Mack, asked the child, do you know any of these faces? And the child said no. And that puzzled Mack, the researcher, because he had reason to believe that this child had had an experience with one of these beings, let's say. So later on, when he went back over this and parsed it, he realized the question was off. He said, do you know any of these figures? And the child didn't know.
Not personally, no.
So when he reworded it, it turned out, the child could identify the alien figure. She, I think it was a girl, just didn't know the alien. But again, I want to say this so clearly, that we don't talk about aliens in this book, because I think it's another stage in the sophistication of this discussion, and we wanted to keep it simple and absolutely fact-based, and we didn't want to get into a discussion because the level of proof that is required to bring forward is much more difficult and higher when you're talking about alien beings and paranormal beings than talking about the physical objects, which we now have established they do exist. They have been seen by our most credible observers, Navy pilots. They've been measured by Navy instruments. They've been seen in countless photographs. Today, everybody has a cell phone, and there's more pictures than ever of these objects zipping around. But the real good pictures are things that the Navy has, and a lot of them are still classified. As a matter of fact, we don't know, how, the extent of the information that the government has compiled. It's certainly more than has come out. So that it's important to go back to that again and again and differentiate what we know, what we now have documented, and what we think or we might speculate. It's speculation, and this book doesn't go there.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great strategy, and one that even though my work has taken me into the more exotic realms, if it's a conversation or a basic discussion, I do my best, and in conference presentations, to ground my talks in post-war history, wherever possible, to give genuine historic references. And you've also set up an opportunity for secondary effect here, it occurs to me, when you include something like the extremely well documented Zimbabwe school event, where ever so many articulate, observant, smart, healthy, balanced children absolutely stuck to those stories. A youngster reading that book may feel a connection with those children and some validation. And some years after that, the parent may want to say, sit down with me. A man named Randall Nickerson made a wonderful documentary film on this. Let's get to meet some of these young people. Yeah. And remember, you read that in your book, UFOs, and it really happened. And here we are. And it's one more acknowledgement of moving into the adult world on this. It's going to be very interesting to chat with you both 6 months or a year from now on the impact and the blowback and the reactions and where it takes off or where there is resistance. And there will be some, of course, parents or school board members who just on principle, we don't need this, just shut down the wall. It will be very interesting to see.
Well, we'll be interested. I also wanted to mention, Peter, that the University of New Mexico Press was very careful with this book. Yes. And before it was published, it was vetted by numerous child psychologists. Good. So they didn't just, say, okay, let's publish this. They were very concerned, that it be acceptable to this market and that it passed muster with this group. So that was key.
That matters. Also, what matters is that, there are so many outstanding presses out there, and a lot of them with main offices in New York, and some you've been affiliated with. But to have a book like this published by a university press is another extraordinary plus. It immediately pulls the rug out of a certain amount of debunking. David Jacobs, Dr. David Jacobs, historian at Temple University, who, of course, was a close colleague of Bud's, his first book, The UFO Controversy in America, was published, I'm trying to remember, the University of Indiana Press.
Yes, indeed.
But then...
It was a shocking bestseller for them. It was the first bestseller they'd ever had.
And his book on essays on abduction was published by the University of Kansas Press, where I think every contributor, except for maybe Bud, was a PhD. We are coming into the end of our time together here. Can you I know it's Amazon, but any particular information you can give our viewers and listeners about where to order this book now? It is available now. You talk.
Well, it's already being shipped on Amazon, but it will be available through independent bookstores. Some will stock it, some by order, certainly Barnes & Noble. Any place where you buy books, you can order the book.
It will be an audio book.
It will be a Kindle and an audio book as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's already shipping, so it's ahead of the pub date, which is April 15th, but Amazon's already shipping it, so it's available now.
Well, our time has flown. It's been a real pleasure. We will remain in close contact. I am very much looking forward to my copy, and I have a number of children in my life. The list is growing longer. It's I'll be placing a mass order at some point, and looking forward to their reactions to your book.
Peter, it's always great talking to you. It's wonderful, and I hope we'll see you at Exeter again this summer.
Absolutely, and back to you on that as soon as I can. Ralph and Deborah Blumenthal, thank you so much for your time. This is Peter Robbins. Meanwhile, here on Earth, stay with us. Back after the break.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
It's not just a donation.
It's a warm blanket.
It's a bottle of clean water.
It's a roof and a bed.
It's knowing someone cares.
It's feeling safe.
It's a today that's better than yesterday.
Every dollar you can spare helps so much more than you can imagine. Please, donate now to help people affected by Hurricane Ian. Your support is urgently needed.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
And we're back. The more perceptive of you can see that we're back, but we're not back. The previous Peter Allmans was dressed in a black sweater with different lighting. In fact, the recording with Ralph and Deborah Blumenthal was recorded last week. It's one of those shows where it's split between then and now. And now, very briefly, my next guest, Stephen Bassett, returns to Meanwhile Here on Earth. He is, of course, the executive director of Paradigm Research Group, also known as PRG, founded in 1996 to end a government-imposed embargo on the truth behind extraterrestrial-related phenomena. He's spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of disclosure, given over 1,200 radio and television interviews with PRG's advocacy work extensively covered by national and international media, including CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, The Washington Post, and The New York Times. We'll be talking, well, you'll see what we'll be talking about. Stephen Bassett, welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
It's great to be with you, Peter.
Yes, for some reason, I'm mysteriously obscured, so you can't really, it seems to me that way, although you may be seeing me on camera. Steve, I'm going to ask you to bear with me a little bit today. I have a fabulous cold, so I'm like a 78 record running on 33, an analogy that will be lost to only some of our viewers and listeners.
I understand completely, Peter. I've had some issues myself of late. We are not getting any younger, are we?
Well, I don't know how that happened. Steve, you sent me an article that I started to read and then thought, I'll lie down and have a cold for the next few days. So I didn't finish it, but it really got me thinking. Can we begin by talking about the content of that article and then take it from there?
Okay, now I send out a lot of articles and stuff, so help me here. Which one specifically are you referring to?
I'm going to have to look it up.
Is it the Liberation Times article by Sharp?
That's it.
Okay. Yeah, we can start with that. Absolutely. How can I preface this? First of all, I want to praise Christopher Sharp. He's a reporter for the Mirror, contributor to the Mirror, and which does good articles on this issue. Sometimes it gets a little tabloidy, but not by and large. They're pretty good. And Sharp writes some of them, but he started his own publication, Liberation Times, and he is just putting out great coverage. He's doing the right thing, and he is one of a group of journalists who have taken this issue on in the right way and have been doing outstanding work, who are not connected to the big institutions, the Times and the Wall Street Journal and all the big papers. And these are the people that are going to get substantially recognized once disclosure comes. There are other entities and groups that have come together, newer organizations that are doing exceptional work now. The restraints are off, the criticisms and skepticism is fading away, and politicians and the government is getting involved in the issue in the way it should. So we're in this transition. And ultimately, we'll end with the confirmation event that the ET or the non-human intelligence presence is quite real, and the government knows about it. And I think the entities that have been doing the right thing and doing the good work in the last few years are going to be out in front of the big organizations. Podcasts such as yours are going to thrive and get a great deal of attention in the post-disclosure era. The fact is that, but the truth is that once disclosure takes place, the manner of institutions and companies and entities and everything else are going to jump in and try to all get through the door at once with this project, this deal, that book, that doc, whatever, the streaming series. Just what can I say? That's just the way it's going to be. But those that have been out there during this important time, they're going to have a head start. And that's going to serve them well. You take, and then the big shots like the Washington Times, the Washington Times, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, they will get in the game, I can assure you. But initially, they're going to be slowed down by the fact that in the weeks and months following the confirmation event, they're going to have to do a lot of apologizing and answer a lot of awkward questions. And they're going to be stuttering and confused. Well, we didn't want to affect national policy, or the government made it clear this was too important to get involved in. We didn't want to take the risk. Whatever, fumbling and mumbling, trying to explain why, in spite of the fact that top journalists in these entities, various journalists over the decades, have known that the government's position is an embargo and that the presence of these entities is true, simply would not investigate. They would write about it. They would go only so far. In other words, they played along. They laid down for the government's policy on truth embargo. And they're going to have to answer for that in the weeks and months following disclosure. And it's going to be very tough. And during that period, some of the righteous dudes who have been stepping in and doing the hard work as we approach disclosure, they're going to have a very strong couple of weeks and months before the big shots finally get in the game and say, okay, we're not apologizing anymore, but boy, are we really going to go get you the truth now. We're going to dig, we're going to push, we're going to investigate. We're not going to stand for any more nonsense. We're going to go get the truth. Okay, good. So Christopher Sharp is one of those people that is going to have a very good post-disclosure experience. And this article is a perfect example. Now, this article entitled "Congress Prepares for UFO Hearings as Frustration Escalates Among Politicians."
And what's the source and the date, if possible, for anybody that wants to?
April 4th, 6 days old.
Okay.
Right, 6 days old. So right away, this is a headline that I don't recall seeing previously. Right? In other words, there have been a couple similar, but overall, going back 75 years, I don't recall a headline like that. Congress prepares for UFO hearings as frustrations escalate among politicians. Frustrations about what? About getting the information and seeing the programs advance in an appropriate way. Come on, right? I mean, this is a pretty big deal. But the fact is, the vast number of people who are living in America right now, let's just keep it just with America, the U.S., they don't understand what this means. They don't realize how significant this is. Why should they? They have lives to lead. They're busy. They can't be paying attention to everything that's going on, certainly not paying attention to complex issues that the government is going out of its way to suppress, undermine, and confuse. And so most people in the country simply have no idea how important that headline is. I do. And my job is to try to let other people know how important it is and let them spread the word so that more and more people will start to realize and raise their head up a little bit and go, whoa, there's something going on around here. I need to pay maybe more close attention. A good analogy is people go to the beach. They go to the beach to swim and to dance in the surf and lie down and get some sun. They don't go down there and every minute they look over their shoulder or look out just to look at a giant wave coming in. Never know when a tsunami might show up, particularly over in the Asian part of the world. No, they don't do that. They're playing. They're enjoying their lives. That's why they have those giant horns. That's why they have those various warning systems. They're built in on the beaches all across Asia. If a tsunami starts to develop and is coming in, the clangers go off. And they're basically saying, hey, you've got to pay attention and you need to do something. That's what activists are for. Letting people, the vast majority of all people who are leading their lives and cannot follow all of these things, particularly things of great importance, letting them know they need to pay attention and keeping the issue alive. And of course, keeping the government aware so that they can take action, or at least they can learn and know what's happening when it happens and not be a victim of a paradigm shift, but rather to benefit from it. So Congress prepares for UFO hearings as frustration escalates among politicians. So he starts off and he says, Liberation Times understands that members of Congress are preparing for public hearings regarding the issue of unidentified aerial anomalous phenomena. That is another version of UAP. Unidentified aerial phenomena is another version. Both of them I'm fine with. All right. Anomalous phenomena, unidentified anomalous phenomena, kind of like that. UFO, still around. Not going to go away, but I'd like to kind of put it in my rearview mirror, to be honest with you. So there's going to be hearings. He's hearing it. I'm hearing it. There's indications all over. There's going to be hearings, real hearings. What we had back in May last year was not so much a hearing. It was a report on a part of a couple of officials to a subcommittee in the House about progress that's going on. That's not the hearings we're talking about. The hearings that matter are when witnesses to events and evidence come and sit in front of a major committee and give testimony under oath and ask a lot of interesting questions. That's the hearings he's talking about. And yes, they are coming. Have they been delayed perhaps by recent developments? Certainly more political chaos, unprecedented stuff. Yeah, that's true. Right now, the number of articles being published on the ET issue, UAP issue, is fallen off 90%. Sometimes days go by, I don't get a single alert. Again, I'm not surprised. They've had these kinds of lulls, but I assure you, the major media are ready to jump back in the moment there's something to bite down on, and there will be in time. So he goes on and says this: as previously reported by Liberation Times, multiple congressional committees may be involved. According to one source, certain politicians intend to hold UAP hearings before the summer recess. Yeah, they need to do that, right? Why? Because they want to get these are important hearings that millions of people are going to want to watch, that are nonpartisan. And you really want to get these underway and see where they're going to go before the political season begins again. And I mean the election season, which in our country starts about 11 months too soon. All right.
Pretty much. And
costs a fortune, billions of dollars thrown down the drain in an effort to elect people to jobs that pay $170,000 to $200,000 a year. Right. It's insane. It's a waste of time and money. It's corrupt. It's undermining our country. It's ruining everything. But whatever. It's going to start later this year. They need to get the hearings done and out the door before that. So I totally agree. But then he states, however, it should be cautioned that until confirmed outside events relating to fallout from various legal actions that are going on right now with respect to former politicians, things might be held back. But then comes this paragraph, and this is the one that struck me, and I cannot call people's attention to enough. And this is true, by the way. Liberation Times understands that Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and Representative Tim Burchett are keen to holding hearings within the Senate and the House. Now, what have we learned here? Well, first of all, we've learned that Senator Gillibrand is still seriously involved in this issue.
She sure is. Yeah.
She helped write the language in the second National Defense Authorization Act regarding the program being set up over at the Pentagon, which is now titled ARROW, All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. ARROW, not a bad name. But she's also received a number of briefings, classified briefings. She's really serious about this. And so she expects to have hearings. And that would be the Senate Intel Committee. There could be a subcommittee, but probably the Intel Committee. Burchett is a Tennessee congressman who has gone all in on this issue. He shoved all his chips in the table. He's a very conservative Tennessee Republican who bit down on this right around the time that Scott Bray and Moultrie came forward and that report.
Yeah.
And can't get in front of enough cameras talking about it and making extremely strong statements. ETs are here. We're reverse engineering ET technology, and on and on. I mean, just Google Tim Burchett UFO and enjoy.
Yeah.
He's not a major player in the Democrat and the GOP. He doesn't have a lot of press until now. And so he saw an opportunity to get media attention, which is good, and do it regarding an issue that is nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Now, he also makes extremely partisan statements as well. So he's not shy. And it's not that he's totally taking cover here. He's going, I'm going to be partisan, but I'm also going to be nonpartisan. This is an issue that I'm going to take on. And he takes it on in a nonpartisan way. He doesn't really push a particular political angle on it. So Burchett for sure, but Mike Gallagher, who was made the chairman of the China subcommittee in the House, he is a very significant player, and he's considered a rising star. He is also called for hearings on this. So then comes this paragraph, and this is something that just astounded me. Again, because I know the history of this issue. For those that don't, let me enlighten you.
You bet.
Last week, during a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on Tuesday, Kirsten Gillibrand spoke out, questioning senior Pentagon officials, including Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, about the budget required for the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, tasked with investigating unidentified aerial or unidentified anomalous phenomena. There's already been a number of reports that a number of people within certain committees are not happy that the funding seems to be a little slow to make the Arrow all that it can be. And it's been brought up. And this is one of those instances. Senator Gillibrand, who chairs the Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities, asked why the Arrow was underfunded for the second year in a row. Quoting her, I was disappointed that the second year in a row, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or Arrow, was not fully funded in the Department of Defense's budget request. Understanding that we cannot get into specific budget figures in this forum, can you discuss why Arrow was not fully funded? In response, Michael J. McCord, the Undersecretary of Defense, seemed to suggest that Ronald Moultrie, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, right, it's a non-trivial job, by the way, had not relayed any concerns or requests for further funding. Senator, I don't have any information from my colleague, Undersecretary Moultrie, that we needed additional funding. It's a relatively new office. We're standing up, so I was under the impression, this quote is misquoted. I'm under the impression that we have adequate funding for the relatively new state of this, but I'll double back with him regarding that. Okay. So what has happened here? To my knowledge, it's the very first time that a member of Congress, let alone a senator, let alone a member of the Intel Committee, let alone a chairman of an Intel Committee subcommittee, rather an Armed Forces Committee subcommittee, right? In other words, she's part of two of the most powerful committees in all of Congress. And an individual who was a legitimate candidate for president and may run for president again, specifically queried the Secretary of Defense on the UAP issue. Now, the mass majority of people in the country will go, that's what their job, isn't it? That's what they do. And of course, she would bring that up. They asked for some money. They wanted something done. And no!
This is unique.
For 75 years, we have lived in this fog of truth embargo, this policy of disinformation, misinformation, misdirection, little coercion, little subversion. While people spent decades and decades trying to punch through it and get to the truth, and then just died, couldn't live long enough to finish the job, went broke, decade after decade, and the DOD had nothing to say. And now this. So what I'm trying to convey to people that don't know much about this issue, that might just be listening in, or to people that know more about this issue that might tell them about it, or people that know a lot about this issue but just can't quite bring themselves to accept the fact that we are winning, that this race is almost over because it's gone on so long. It's going to go on forever.
Steve, let me jump in and ask you a question.
Of course.
The aforementioned congressional representatives, Senator, include Marco Rubio, who is still seriously involved in this subject. Number one, as we've observed, the more individuals from both sides of the aisle that find their way to supporting and becoming passionate about this particular subject, each one of them, for me, brings greater hope of the fact that we can ultimately overcome certain other differences if we have a strong rallying point, and this is an incredibly strong one in terms of our humanity and the future of humanity. Do you think there's a chance that when the next hearings do come into play, that even the introduction of some more exotic aspect of this area of study has a chance of being brought up? And what I mean by that is in the previous segment, which you can take a look at when I send you the link to this show tomorrow, Ralph and Deborah Blumenthal took the made the extraordinary decision to write a children's book aimed at 6 to 9-year-olds about this phenomenon. Strategically, I think they made a very wise decision to talk about the history and the examples of the objects themselves without getting into the occupants. As Dr. David Jacobs once said to me years ago about abduction studies in the later 70s, we were focused on the cars and not the drivers, or the license plates, and not the holders of the licenses. Once you even mention or refer to a possible living being associated with UAPs, UFOs, etc., that becomes exotic. And of course, more so, the idea, as you mentioned, of back engineering, and then crash retrievals, hybrids, and on into the territory that nobody wants to really touch in public life now. Do you think there's a chance to get even a foot in the door in terms of a reference to that body of information I call exotic in a next hearing?
No, very little chance. That doesn't mean we can't talk about it, right? This is a very tricky historical event taking place, which I am very comfortable with. And I'm really working. I'm trying to get back to DC, get an office set up again, get my publicist, got to raise about 10, 15,000, because this message is not getting out there. It's not on CNN. It's not on MSNBC. I don't think it's being talked about in Congress. But what is going on right now is ending the truth embargo, not discovering the phenomena. We already discovered the phenomena. The government's known about it. As I've said 1,000 times, they've known about it since the 1940s. The people that needed to know about it and deal with it have dealt with it.
Sure.
Right. That's 70 some years. Do they have crashed vehicles? Yes, absolutely. How far have they gone with utilizing that technology or re-engineering it? It's tough to know that. There's good reason to think they've made some solid progress. There's good reason to think maybe they haven't, but they've had it, and they have a lot of resources, and we're pretty technologically sophisticated these days. And so I think there's some ET technology that's not available to us that they have mastered and they're keeping for a rainy day or whatever. 70 years ago, okay? 70 years. So obviously they didn't just discover that there's something there that they didn't understand. No, they do understand it. They know a lot about it, but it's classified. It's not available to us. And so what is going on now is not learning about the phenomena, discovering the phenomena. It is ending the truth embargo. Everything right now is about ending the truth embargo. If somebody in Congress is completely clueless on this issue and learn about it through a briefing, or they're being told by colleagues something's going on, okay, for them it's like, I had no idea. Oh, my Lord, wow, this is amazing. I get it. But the government in the collective, particularly the military intelligence complex in the collective, of course they know about it. And so what you're seeing is the appropriate people and the appropriate entities within our government doing the appropriate things that you would normally do if you just did learn or become aware that there is unknown technology flying around which has strong indications not being of human origin because it's beyond current human capabilities, right? This is what you would do.
Let me jump in again and ask you a question, Steve. We have 1 year and 7 months until our next presidential election, an unnecessary year of campaigning ahead of us nonetheless. Do you think if there is some new significant event that draws front page attention, even if it's not a very exotic one, but one more series of events that's released that at least has the potential of the tic-tac outreach in terms of media, that one of the individuals that you've mentioned who really does have a strong commitment to this subject might consider a run for the presidency with this as a major plank in their running for the office?
Not going to happen. Absolutely not going to happen. Nobody wants to do that. No, nobody wants to do that, right? Again, this issue is so transcendent, so significant, so above all of the various political issues, some of which have great importance and are not given a proper context, and some have almost no value whatsoever and given overwhelming context, and all the nasty, dirty, silly, stupid things that goes on in the usual political contest that we have here. This issue is transcendent. It makes all of the other ones seem like nothing. And so the idea that that things just won't develop, things are not going to advance, we'll still be kind of stuck, but one candidate is going to say, I've had enough and I'm going to go out and run on the U.S. They don't want to do that. That would be suicide in a way.
Still, yeah.
It would be inappropriate, even though somebody would say, well, yeah, we'll take it. I mean, I think a lot of activists would say, yeah, we'll take it. That's all we can get. Hey, you remember there's been a couple of the candidates that have brought the issue up, right, in the past. It didn't go well.
Governor Richardson, Dennis Kucinich, on down the pantheon.
Dennis Kucinich certainly is a classic example, but there have been others, but it's been very limited. And of course it didn't go well. The idea that, okay, now it'll work. Oh God, no. Here is what they want. Now understand that many of the candidates that are going to run for president are members of the House or Senate. That's already pretty much established. And they're getting briefings. They're all getting briefings. That's a good thing. So it's not like one has got some special info that the other one doesn't have. Now, they all may have certain contacts with certain sources at the Pentagon. It may not be the same. And so they may have a slightly different matrix of information. But overall, they have the general picture. What they want, and if they don't, I would love to sit down with them and explain to them why they want this. Okay, and I hope to have that opportunity pretty soon. It's time for me to get up on Washington, up on Capitol Hill. Is the issue out, completely in play. Yeah. And so everybody will be speaking to it, because how can you not? Now, major hearings in front of the House, a couple of House and Senate committees would put it completely in play. And we don't need another spectacular event. Stop. We've already had enough events and things and coverage and developments and witnesses coming forward to light this fire many times over, right? It's people, well, just one more event. No, it's not about that. It's about people in Congress, House, Senate, people over at the Department of Defense doing the things you're supposed to do based on what we have known, even going back to the 40s and 50s. Yeah. That's all that's happening here. And if it moves forward appropriately, then any one of those candidates can speak to the issue without any fear that the other 15 candidates will look at them and go, yeah, point at them, like in that movie, The Body Snatchers, and start screaming, right? Donald Sutherland, that was a great role. He ate the scenery in that role. No, it's not going to happen. They're all going to look at each other knowingly and nod their head and give their own views about it. And one of the reasons why that will happen is because it is in the best interest of every single one of them. Yeah. They, at this time, particularly at this time, the best friend that any candidate for president or vice president or even the Senate, less so the House, could have is a really important nonpartisan issue that anybody could get on board with, right? Democrat, Republican, independent, libertarians, all of them are by and large at this point starting to address this issue and discovering that it's no longer the third rail of American politics.
Yes.
It was always the third rail. It wasn't Social Security, right? That was another one of those tricks that they played on us. We'll make Social Security the third rail of American politics so no one will notice that. No, it's not the third rail. The real third rail is the ET issue over there.
Right. Like, touch it and see what happens.
Yeah, touch that baby and see what happens. All right. So they desperately need this nonpartisan issue to run on.
So interesting.
And all it will take to have that is hearings. So that's why the hearings have got to happen this summer. So the issue is already out and fully in play, and everybody can have an opinion about it. But I will be stunned if when this thing gets in play and you've got 6, 7 members of current or former members of the Senate speaking to it, to the media, and a couple of House members perhaps who got presidential aspirations speaking to it. And one of them takes the position, no, I'm not buying this. My other friends and colleagues that want to be president, I understand that, but this issue is ridiculous. It's nothing but balloons or something. It's totally ridiculous. And so I'm the debunker candidate. I'm planning the debunker flag. I will be stunned if that happens. Nobody is going to do that. It's not going to happen.
Not next year.
So this article about Christopher Sharp, that little bit, for someone that knows the history of this, says all that is needed to confirm that we are in the last weeks and months of the truth embargo. Nothing lasts forever. And that includes this godforsaken embargo. And that's why my current hashtag, which I established, I established this hashtag. There's no question that I established it. It's mine. You can't trademark a hashtag, apparently, but I can keep reminding people. Hashtag months, not years.
Steve, hypothetical question, and asked in a spirit of knowing that you don't know the answer, but that your intuition may be better than most people. Since the beginning of this phenomena, under the official beginning under President Truman, it's been widely assumed, and I think rightly so, that different presidents during their time in office or sometime before or after learn different things about the phenomena. That it's fair to say that Truman and then Eisenhower, being very respected by the military as well as the elected officials, knew a great deal. In Kennedy, they withheld information for certain reasons, although he had other ways of finding out, and so on. What do you think that our current president, Joe Biden, actually knows about the UFO phenomena?
No idea. Specifics. First of all, the way we operate here in the United States is we don't do the king thing. And so you got 8 years tops, and there might only be 4. So there's a lot of turnover. And there's that. Okay, so you've got different kinds of people so far, just men coming into the White House as president of different backgrounds and different parties, who then appoint their own top people at key agencies like the DOD, CIA, and so forth. So that's changing over. Core staff doesn't change. A lot of the core, but even on time, that changes as well. So you have all these fluctuations that have been going on for 75 years. and the world changes as well. So the idea that presidents don't get the same set of information from, I guess, classified briefings when they come into office is hardly shocking and almost certainly inevitable. And that's true of everything. That's true of every aspect of national security. They're going to get a different picture from a different set of briefers at a different time and so forth. There's nothing shocking about that. Is it possible that the Department of Defense, which is to say those that have managed this issue and controlled it, run it, done the research, have deliberately withheld certain things from certain presidents that they might not have from others? That's possible. I mean, it's not a good thing, and it needs to be fixed. But it's possible. But this idea that there were some presidents that had no idea, right? You mean there's something up there? No. Every single president has been, one way or another, tipped off, briefed, provided the necessary information from one source or another that phenomena is in fact not human. And then the question was, what was that president going to do about it? And each president has had a different set of circumstances. In other words, even if every single president got the exact same briefing, not every single president would have had the same capability and or resources and or connection to act upon it. Mm-hmm. So you got that as well. The military intelligence complex is a massive thing, incredibly well funded, with a great power, with a pretty overwhelming mandate to defend the country against foreign adversaries of growing strength and technology. It's a big deal. They take it very seriously. So if, in fact, a complex of entities that broad-ranging and powerful and funded and with technological resources did make a decision that this issue needed to be embargoed, it would be embargoed. And because of its national security foundation, it was pretty insulated from political interference. And let's face it, the issue is profoundly difficult and complex. And so if you look at what politicians generally deal with, and if you look at the risks that the risk-reward ratios that they calculate, boy, I can understand why almost any politician would go, I don't want to go there. I couldn't handle it if I did go there.
Yeah, this is kind of a point that's occurred to me over the decades, that to whatever degree a new office holder is briefed, that the briefing probably includes enough borderline provocative material about the life form reality associated with some UFOs that a briefing would be more or less calculated to leave a new president saying to themselves, I think my executive decision here is going to be, hope to heaven this does not blow up in my administration. Who needs this? And we have other things to deal with now, and I pass this along to who's next. But no particular intuition on what Joe Biden might or might not know compared to, say, the previous president.
Well, yes, when a president comes in, the military intelligence complex, the DoD, has all the cards. In other words, they brief the president. The president to come in and brief the DoD. And so they can show whatever cards they want to show in whatever way they want to show them. So they can brief a president in such a way that without overtly doing so, could easily have the effect of, thank you for telling me these things. I'm certainly not going to touch this. I'll leave that to you guys. All right. And they are they have the high ground. They hold all the cards. The president is in a very weak position on this issue. This is something that needs to be fixed again in the United States. Hopefully that'll happen. All right. So, but let's go further here. This is a less comprehensive. I would say most of the recent presidents, all of them knew that contact was happening. Now, how far do I want to go back on it? Truman may not have known that. They may not have had information about individual contacting going on between ETs and humans. They had dead ETs. They had a live ET after Roswell, but unless that live ET spilled the beans on the contact issues, they might not have known that. Neither would, very likely, Eisenhower wouldn't have known. One of the historical facts that I would love to see eventually emerge and be verified, who was the first president that got briefed on that? But I think it goes back further than we might expect. And one of the reasons I'm confident about that is that we have learned, by virtue of their own testimony, that guess what? There are contactees in the military. There are contactees in the intelligence agencies. There are contactees even in the political class. You see, the ETs contact whoever the hell they want, right? They don't seem to. I mean, there may be some criteria that they use, and there may be some favoring of one group over another, but by and large, just about anybody can be a contactee. And being an assistant director of the CIA doesn't exempt you. If they want to contact you, by God, they will. And I don't care how many security guards you put at the front door, they're going to get you, okay? Because they're really good at that. So you have contactees, and guess what? Those contactees that have existed within the military services and in the agencies.
I would guess it's a reflection of those in the general population. No question, they're in there.
Yeah, but they've reported. Not all, but they have, and I think they've been sought out. In other words, I think, believe me, if I'm a member of the national security team, and I'm fully aware that ETs are contacting civilians or just the regular people out there, boy, I want to know about that. I want to know what's going on. Now, one way to do that is go out and somehow try to get information from that civilian contactee. And that's one of the interesting areas that is discussed from time to time. Have they done that? What methodologies did they use? How did they just contact them and say, look, we'd like to chat with you. We understand that you're taking some time off to visit friends from elsewhere, but it's not RSVP. Tough. They might do that. Some people might say, hey, I want to help in any way I can. What would you like to know? But still pretty awkward, because any kind of outreach like that, it definitely is risky. They're gambling there. It could easily become a problem. But if you're already working for the government under salary, maybe under NDAs or with a classified status, and you happen to be a contactee, you're gold. Okay? Yes, we would like to talk to you. And no, you can't talk to anybody else about that. But, here's some nice hors d'oeuvres. We'll bring in some food later. We have some fine wines for you. Let's sit down as friends and tell us, what happens when they visit you at 1 a.m.? I think that's been going on. I think they have been sharing information that way. They have known about the contact phenomenon as well. But they're staying away from it, aren't they? Of course they are. Again, when I say this issue is transcendent, I'm not joking. It is transcendent. There is no other issue in the world more significant, more pregnant, more potentially implicative for the human race than this issue. Nothing. Not even global warming. I'm so sorry, which I happen to believe that weather change is very dramatic right now. Yeah, it doesn't compare to the ET issue. Okay, way bigger than that. Pick anything else, I don't care. It's a big deal. And so addressing it is extremely difficult. Yeah. It's like, I don't know, a member of Congress saying, I'd like to maybe know something about quantum mechanics. There's probably some legislation that might be useful there. Can you give me a quick 20-minute rundown on it, kind of explain it to me, and then I can decide how I might incorporate it into some future legislation? No, that's not what's going to happen. So the understanding that is clearly in place with the emerging process, which I totally support and have talked about many times, is that there is a range of, there is a level of complexity with respect to this issue, which needs to be served in the appropriate time. In other words, it's probably a good idea to learn some Newtonian mechanics before you jump in to quantum mechanics. All right, you could just jump over it, but it's a pretty big leap. In other words, there needs to be a process that is constructive and appropriate, and not get out ahead of our skis too much, because we are really skiing down a very steep mountain, and very, very dangerous jumps, big giant rocks, whatever. And so contact and a range of other things which are just too much for this round are not on the table. Now, does that mean I can't point it out? Yeah, I'm happy to point it out, right? So does that mean I'm ruining it for them? Meaning, oh, no, Bassett's saying that there's these other things, but we can't touch them, and he's ruining it for us. No, not really. They're moving forward. They're not talking about contact. They're dealing with national security. They're dealing with the fundamental phenomena. They're dealing with technology and what have you. The idea of a non-human controller or pilot of one of those is brought up, which is pushing it, but yet that's in play. And that's about enough. Having Bob Salas and some other men sit in front of the Senate Intel Committee and give and reaffirm their affidavits that they put out, I don't know how many years ago, testifying to specific events where these craft come down and just turn all the missiles off, right, and then turn them back on. Or if you turn them back on, turn them off again, and then fly away, and then you can turn them on, that kind of thing. That is a lot right there. You don't need to get into contact or anything else. Right there, you have all you need for a full-fledged total government effort to get this information resolved and to the American people and move forward. That's enough right there. And that's frankly going to happen. Pilot sightings and things like that, that's all fine. But the nuclear issue, as I will be talking about at the upcoming Contact in the Desert conference, June 2 to 4, and Indian Wells Renaissance Resort, which is going to be the premier conference of the year, period. It has been huge in the past. The pandemic really kind of pushed it back, but it's been a major event, and it's going to be major again. And I'm going to be there with 59 other speakers, and I'm going to be talking about this in much greater detail, but with a huge emphasis on the nuclear issue.
Remind viewers and listeners when the conference takes place and where.
June 2-4, Indian Wells, California, Renaissance Resorts, and about southeast of Palm Springs. It's been there before. They've had as many as 4,000 people. The energy level is extraordinary, 60 speakers. It's got everything, right? Great restaurants and so forth. It's not everybody can go. There's costs. It's not cheap. But for those that can, you don't want to miss this. And I'll be getting into this. There's going to be, first of all, there's a good possibility that we will actually have hearings before that event takes place. So imagine that. Imagine if some Senate Intel Committee hearings have taken place. Cameras, millions of people watching, all the media coverage of that, and then the Contact in the Desert event takes place. The energy level in that event is just going to be off the charts. And of course, there'll be a lot to talk about. So it's happening now, folks. And if you want to really enjoy and participate, there you go. June 2 to 4, Contact in the Desert. So to get back to the key point that I make.
Yeah, we're coming into our last few minutes. So
okay. Yeah. I put out an op-ed on this and submitted it to a number of papers, and they just weren't interested. I eventually published it in the Liberation Times. Thank you, Christopher. But it can always get republished, in which I make the very points that I'm making now. What is happening is a logical, responsible, appropriate way to get to where the president can confirm this issue is not human and have essentially the disclosure event. Well, not essentially, that would be the disclosure event, thus opening the door to go into all of the rest. Once we've gotten there, and that's no longer a matter in question, so that any politician, any journalist, or any scientist can raise their hand and go, well, here are my thoughts on that in terms of the ET issue. Obviously, we'd like to know where they come from. What do we know about that? And then somebody else could raise their hand and say, well, let's look at some of the contactee reports. There's been hundreds of thousands. Have there been instances when, in the presence of these extraterrestrials or non-human entities, beings, that they have actually conveyed to the contactee where they're from, right? Things like that. And it'll be okay. They know they can do that, right? No, they're going to jump on them and go, what are you talking about? What are you talking about where they're from? There are no ETs. The government has said that. It's all a conspiracy theory. It's all nonsense. It's all crazy. Nobody's going to do that. That's in the rear view mirror. Once we cross that line, everything else can be in play. Now, does it mean it'll all come out right away? No. But the process of learning will move forward steadily, irrevocably. And contact will be very early on a menu. There's no question. Too much has been written about it. Too many movies have been made about it. Too many contacts are coming forward now. That you're going to have, once disclosure or the confirmation event has taken place, you're going to have some pretty high-level people coming forward and going and just raising their hand and going, "Look, you can appreciate. I was the undersecretary for the whatever the hoopah and everything else. I couldn't say it, but I've been getting visits since I was like 5. An actor here, a musician there, a politician, whatever. You're going to have that happening, and people are going, "Wow." I mean, so you see how this snowball is going to be awfully big by the end of the year. I mean, it's going to be just rolling forward. That's what's coming.
Steve, remind listeners and viewers where they can keep up with your latest work. And again, Contact in the Desert, June 2nd to 4th, coming at you.
Have we already gone through an hour already? Boy, I can't believe it.
I think time.
No, paradigmresearchgroup.org. Contact information is there, website. I mean, the email and all that. I've got 2 big events coming up that I'm very excited about. Contact in the Desert, June 2-4, Indian Wells, California. And then World Ufology Conference. Now, look, do I like the term ufology? No, but it's okay. It's all right. It's a World Ufology Conference. It's like, I don't know, 5th or 6th one. This started out in Spain and Barcelona by some people, again, who have gotten into the issue and doing it right. And they're holding substantial events, and they're just growing and growing because it's global, right? However, they are serving the Spanish-speaking world, obviously, in a very intense way. I think there's going to be another one in Barcelona in September, but this one in Mexico City in December, I can't even imagine how much is going to happen.
And on that note, we are going to have to disintegrate. Steve Bassett, thank you so much for jumping in on short notice. This is often the case, and bearing with me. I will be at the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference in beautiful Eureka Springs, Arkansas this weekend. I hope some of you will be there. Otherwise, take care and see you soon.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.